Hello and welcome to the Drexel interview. I'm your host, Paula Marantz-Cohen, speaking to you from Drexel University's Picture Gallery. Today my guest is author Cordelia Frances Biddle. Her book, The Conjurer, is a thriller set in Victorian Philadelphia. It is just out from St. Martin's Press. Cordelia Biddle is a descendant of two of Philadelphia's oldest and most prominent families, the Biddles and the Drexels. Some of her ancestors show up in her fiction. Cordelia Frances Biddle, welcome to the Drexel interview.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, well, good. And I'm looking at you and I see that you are in costume.
I am.
And could you tell us about the costume?
I will. And let me tell you, don't try this at home. It's not comfortable.
You look very comfortable. It fits
really?
You very well. Yeah.
Well, it does fit. But before I became a novelist, I was an actress. And I love to get inside the skin of my characters. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do my public appearances and library talks and so forth in costume, not the grand ball gown, which really doesn't give you an idea of what people felt like wearing these clothes, but the undergarments. So this is a real corset. You can tighten it in the back doing the bedpost routine, as you saw Scarlett O'Hara do. And you really can tighten it, and you can get a little wasp waist, which I wouldn't recommend. And this is what, in that period, my novel takes place in the mid-1840s in Philadelphia, and they didn't wear hoop skirts yet, but they wore a large kind of bustly thing, so they looked as if they had great big bottoms. So that's what I have when I stand up. I don't know why that was so attractive, but it was.
Well, you look lovely. It's very flattering, I have to say, but it's not comfortable.
It's not comfortable, no. You see me perching here. I think these women, when you look at portraits, they are either reclining or they're standing, because to sit down and bend at the waist was virtually impossible.
Well, I hope you won't be in too much pain.
No, I won't. I've gotten accustomed to it. I do not write, however, wearing this.
That's good to know. I want to talk about your work.
Yes.
Starting with your first novel, which was set in 1903, a grand tour aboard a yacht that was owned by the Drexel family, which is the founding family of Drexel University. So it's very apropos of us here. You took a real trip that was taken by that family in 1903, and you added a little illicit romance and murder. Tell us about that book and what got you started using your ancestors to write fiction.
I grew up looking at photographs of that journey, and I inherited the photographs, and they are haunting pictures to me. It's a journey, as you said, around the world, and it was taken by George Drexel, the youngest son of Anthony Drexel, the founder of the university, who owned three large yachts and two smaller yachts. And the largest of them all was called the Alcedo. And the Alcedo was 300 feet in length and had a crew of 100, which is extraordinary. The Alcedo was the largest privately owned yacht of the time. Really? And I always wondered what was outside of the picture, what I couldn't see. And I began eventually, as I grew up and then was working as an actress in New York, to look beyond the photographs and envision a different story. So I didn't use the real Drexels, but I used their real itinerary and did a huge amount of research. And 1903 was a seminal time in the world. The Uganda Rail had just been built, the Trans-Siberian Rail had just been finished. You could really see all of the developing nations starting to grab pieces of land around the world. And obviously, retrospect, it's easy to see that World War I was about to come along. But that's when I said it in that time because it's really the end of the Gilded Age. So here was this family from Philadelphia, very wealthy, really quite isolated in terms of their world experience. But they went to Borneo, they went to the most dangerous of places. And I started to wonder why. Why did they do
Now,
that?
had you had this impulse to wonder like this as a child? Did you know you would become a writer? You say you were an actress first.
I was told by a teacher when I was in maybe 6th grade that I shouldn't try writing because I had no imagination. So I had always wanted to be a writer, but I switched careers at 6th grade. You're really not much of a career.
You switched careers in 6th grade, okay.
Well, I switched my vision, and I decided to be an actress instead because I thought that wouldn't require imagination. And then, in fact, it turns out that I do have an imagination.
And when did you discover you had an imagination? When you wrote this book? Or had you been trying before that?
I've always had very bizarre and exotic dreams. So I really started to write down my dreams, and I thought, either I'm just conjuring them up and those events really happened, or I've invented them. So maybe I do have an imagination.
Okay. Well, most of the books you've written have been thrillers, and I wonder why you're drawn to that genre.
Well, I think you have an opportunity, if you're writing a thriller or a mystery, to solve not necessarily just a crime, but to put your imprint on you as a writer, on how you feel the world could be a better place. You are eliminating the forces of evil, as it were.
How interesting. I never heard it put that way.
Well, I think that's why I'm drawn to it, because perhaps, as in this book, the forces of evil somehow get away with it. In the end, they don't. It doesn't have to be neatly wrapped up that the person is taken away in handcuffs and thrown into prison, but the reader knows who the evil person is. And so the reader then has a sense of completion. And you, as a writer, then say, yes, I was able to prove something. I was able to show people what good and evil are.
You've written thrillers, you've written a whole series of thrillers with your husband.
I have. They are mysteries that have crossword puzzles interwoven with the plot. They are in the mystery genre called cozies because they are traditional whodunits. And we invented a crossword editor named Annabella Graham, Anagram, and her husband and they solve.
Very witty.
Yeah, it's fun because you get to play with words. But we're both inveterate crossword puzzle doers. And we were actually working on a crossword together one day, and I threw down the pen in disgust at the use of language because, it was an adjective instead of an adverb, and I thought it was sloppy. And I don't like sloppy language. And a light bulb went off in our heads, and we thought, well, let's write a book and kill a crossword editor, and all the clues will come in the puzzles. So the series took off, and we wrote 12 in the series.
Is the series over now?
It is temporarily because I've been so hard at work on this.
We should talk about this. The Conjurer, your latest book,
Yes.
Is also, it's subtitled A Martha Beale Mystery, which suggests to me then it is the first in a series.
It is. The second, Deception's Daughter, is finished and will debut next August. And I'm hard at work on the third, which is entitled Without Fear.
Okay, so this will go on.
Yes.
This is set in 19th century Philadelphia.
Yes.
And tell us then what got you started in setting it there and coming up with this particular idea.
It was actually doing research into the Drexel and Biddle families. And it was really, my research was for myself. I wanted to know more about my ancestry. And I found that Nicholas Biddle, who was president of the Second Bank of the United States, his star was setting as a result of the dissolution of the bank by Andrew Jackson. And he had been criticized and so forth. And so this very illustrious career was waning. At the same time, Francis Martin Drexel, who had come to this country as an itinerant portrait painter, in fact his portrait is, one of his portraits that he painted is in this room, he was not as successful as he wanted to be, went to Latin America, South America then, and painted the heads of the emerging states and nations in South America, came back to Philadelphia, went back to his painting career, still wasn't making the kind of money that he wanted to make, and decided to become a banker, which is just extraordinary. I mean, it's like me saying, I'll open a bank. But here is this period. There is no stable currency in 1842. The country is still suffering the results of the Great Depression of 1837, and Drexel became so wealthy as a result of this sort of shifting currencies and his connections with both South America and Austria and Germany, where their currencies were strong, that he was able ultimately to make enough money to loan the government during the Civil War $60 million.
Really?
So this was the background of my research, and I thought, here are these two men, and they came together during this time. What is this time? I know nothing about it. We know about Philadelphia in the Revolutionary War time. We know about it during the Civil War, but not this early Victorian period. And it was a time of huge foment. There were race riots and workers' rights riots, and there was huge, grinding, terrible poverty and enormous wealth. There were 10 millionaires in Philadelphia, and New York had only 5. So you have this dichotomy of classes, and I thought that was fascinating, and I really wanted to address social injustice issues as well, so I was able to look at what it was like to be so desperately poor and what it was like to be so incredibly wealthy, and then women's roles within those various strata.
And you incorporate all that into this book while making it also very much a thriller about a serial killer.
Yes.
And what made you decide to write about a serial killer?
I dreamt it.
Really?
I dreamt those scenes. I dreamt, and they're horrible.
Yeah.
But I wondered when I was doing my research. You know, I'm going back and forth to the Library Company of Philadelphia to do my research. I'm reading all the newspapers. I'm delving into the past. The stones and the bricks seem alive to me, and I thought, have I actually conjured up a real presence? Did I invent it in my mind, or is somebody speaking to me from beyond?
Now you're dreaming in this period. You see details of the period. And have you found that your research has confirmed things that you've seen?
It's all, you know.
Or is it too vague?
It's vague, but you're always, if you're reading a newspaper, and you can read the real newspapers and real journals.
You're permeated with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you're always looking, you're trying to read between the lines, because any journalist is trying to report a fair and balanced story.
Yeah.
But then you think, what happened beyond that? Yeah. There was an instance in the same period, I didn't use it, where a man was first employed the insanity defense. And if you read those detailed reports, you want to know more. You want the human element. How did that work? What did it feel like?
Your research brings you ideas from which you then pick and choose what you're going to use. I mean, it gives you ideas for plotting. I assume.
Absolutely.
But I wonder also, was plotting difficult?